Victims have waited decades for this day, to see a former Prime Minister questioned over the government's response to the infected blood scandal.
The evidence I shall give
shall be the truth.
shall be the truth.
Shall be lied, the whole
But far from any
life,
apology
and
or admission of guilt,
everything
there was instead a
lie.
comment seen as offensive. Sir John Major describing what happened as bad luck.
There's no amount of compensation you can give that could actually compensate for what had happened to them. What had happened to them was incredibly bad luck.
Many clearly disagree.
And
The scandal saw up to 5,000 NHS patients infected with HIV or hepatitis C after being given contaminated blood products in the 70s and 80s, around 3,000 of whom have since died. Among them is Nicky Calder, infected with HIV before he was 10 during treatment for haemophilia. He died aged 25.
I try not to be angry and I try not to be bitter. It's very difficult.
But Rosemary says that anger is much harder to suppress when listening to comments such as Sir John's.
Bad luck is when you trip over a paving stone and break your leg or something. Bad luck isn't when you say to somebody, oh, bad luck, you've been given a potentially life-threatening virus. That's not bad luck. We want people to just stand up and say, we did wrong.
No government has taken responsibility for the scandal, and it was the same again today. Sir John Major defending his roles in Margaret Thatcher's cabinets and his own, and the refusal to award compensation.
everyone in this room can think of a dozen things where you could argue someone has a moral obligation to do something. And the government has to keep control of events and keep control of the sum total of its expenditure.
Mr. Major,
throughout his evidence, Sir John Major was at pains to say the government was not unsympathetic to victims and that the decision against compensation was purely practical to avoid setting a potentially costly precedent. But it's an argument victims simply aren't buying.
He's telling a story, and I think he believes it, because what he believes is that there was no liability at the time, but he never investigated it, and his government never investigated it, or if they did, they didn't tell anyone what the outcome of that investigation was. So yes, the victims firmly believe there was a cover-up.
The inquiry is expected to conclude later this year, 3 years after it began. As their numbers continue to dwindle, victims and their families hope it will finally bring justice before it's too late. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
Now you move it.
Triple McCann, wait.
Bad luck. Simple as. John Major. Bad luck. Bad luck is finding the 550 quid. This was a manufactured plan by the Thatcher government, and John Major, you continued it. So it wasn't bad luck, was it?